on YouTube.
Right.
Hi YouTube. Microphone wasn't turned on, so absolutely nobody heard what I said on YouTube. So tonight, they won't be full-blown tutorials, they will just be tips, advice and tricks. So I've got loads of little squares set out, and these squares are set specifically so we can work on little bunches of tutorials and information. So that's what we're going to be working on. So I'm not going to be doing a full tutorial on anything, but this is just a case of, I don't know, if you struggle with curly fur, long hair, straight hair, eyelashes, shiny surfaces, so anything really that you're struggling with specifically. Roses are literally a full tutorial, so that's probably not something I will fit in today, because I know a few people, hi Bevies, I know a few people have struggled on certain specific things like curly fur, or you know, fur on a dog's ear, or you know, something like that. So you are pretty much in control of the types of things that we're going to be going through over the next couple of hours. So I'm still a little bit, oh no, it's bang on 8 o'clock pretty much. Hi Pam. So I'm going to give it till 8:05. That should give enough time for the rest of the people on my YouTube live to come through. I've got graphite pencils. I have got some coloured pencils. Yeah, I can cover things like a dog's nose. That's not a problem. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll explain again throughout the feed because I know that people are coming in and out. So if you are on YouTube from TikTok, you might find it easier on TikTok for the commenting. I don't know. Whatever works best for you guys, really. So somebody has mentioned dog's ears, and somebody has mentioned knowing what colours to use. So they're two things that I could probably cover quite easily. So I'll do dog's nose for starters. Let me write these down actually. Let me write them down. So we have a fur like the bee. Oh, fur like the bee. We have an ear, dog's nose. Didn't put my phone on silent, so I apologise. What else was there? Human ear, dog's nose, fur like a bee, colour picking. Just writing these down on a list. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna cover Stephen's request first because I think this would actually work really well for the YouTube guys as well as TikTok guys. So I am going to lose all the comments on my TikTok because I should be going to my pad. So if you have Procreate, for example, if you don't have Procreate, you can use Photoshop. The people that layering fur is another one that's come up. The people that have done my Patreon tutorials, in fact, I'm pretty sure I have a tutorial in my list of how to pick colours. My sound is on max. My microphone is literally right next to my mouth. I don't think I can get it any higher. It is on max. Yeah. It's 360. Sorry, I lost the mic completely. I've taken the cover off, but I don't think that's making much of a difference. Okay, so if you have an iPad, it's one way of working out what colours you need to use. So let's say, for example, I don't know, we're doing a portrait of this girl. Yeah, you should be able to hear me now. Hi, Dan. Hi, is that Indeen? Hi, HJ. I don't know how many of you are aware, but you can actually get colour palettes straight from your iPad. But if you would like a specific area, then you can just simply hold your finger down over. So if you're not sure on what this colour is on the top of their arm, you can simply just hold over where you want to go and work out exactly what colour it is. So say, for example, quite often I've said in portraits, people don't use purple and grey enough. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So if I move over to this section here, that colour, if you can see, let's turn auto on there. Don't know if you can see it very well, but that's in the red purples section of the colour wheel. So that's, you know, on parts of the skin, that's where you want to be looking at using purples and greys to get your undertones. So using something like Procreate is a really, really good way of getting your colours, so you can work out what colours you need, but don't overcomplicate it. If you have Photoshop, you can do a very, very similar thing with the dropper tool. What I wouldn't recommend though is that you get overly used of just using this as your tool for picking colours out. Quite honestly, I would get in the habit of getting your reference. I'm just going to grab this picture for the sake of it. So I'm going to grab this picture and I'm going to grab a handful of pencils and I'm going to go, okay, right, what in here matches this? And I will literally match by eye. I think that's probably the easiest and best way to train yourself on how to, hi Frog, on how to match them. So if you can do it visually by eye, it's quite honestly the best way to do it. So I know here that I could easily match that with a bit of grey. So that is, Procreate is a good thing. And it's a good way of picking out palettes, but it can also over confuse things because Procreate will give you a flat colour. Whereas working out, okay, well I need to get this greeny colour, I might need to mix some grey and some blue. It's really dark, isn't it? I don't know if I can get it. That's a bit brighter. Definitely create a colour chart. I tend to do that. In fact, I'll show you my colour chart. Some of you, oh God, now my book's fallen over. It's going well today. Some of you have seen this already, and it's worth keeping. So, camera's too close. So this is a colour chart I have for all my pens. These are my illustrators, these are my classiques. And this is just a really cheap photo album from Hobbycraft. I think it cost me £2, £4 in sale. So you don't have to go and buy anything expensive. I've then got all my colours in here. What I don't colour chart, which you can, I just can't be bothered, is my pencils. But what I do is when I do a portrait, I will work my colours out first. So for example, so when I did a Patreon cat eye tutorial, I'm hoping you can see this on both, I went through and I charted all the colours I knew I was going to use in that portrait, and I could work out just by doing a quick loose sketch on here, or you know, just using the colours, that actually these were the colours I was going to use. So keep this with you, because if you work on multiple portraits and you forget, because I always forget what I'm using at the time. And this is another one I've done, so they're worth keeping. So this was a Kingfisher tutorial I did for Anne Kohlberg for the magazine. So I've listed every colour that I've used. And again here. And not only that, I think it's quite nice to get a bit of history about what you've done. So this skulls that I'm doing at the moment, the one I still have not finished, I've actually written down as well where the reference came from, so I don't forget where the reference come from. So it's really, really worth making note. But ideally, you want to start creating these because you don't want to rely on apps. You want to be able to do it from eye. So I would say start getting in that habit, and the more you do it, the less likely you're going to need to in the future, because you're going to look at whatever it is you're doing and work out pretty quickly the colours that you're going to need. So I'm going to work down the list that I have already written down. So somebody has asked how to do the fur like the bee. So let's just grab a box. Let's zoom my YouTube people in so you can see. And I'm not fussed on colours. It's going to be a strange colour bee. What pencils do you use? Pencils really, really do make a big difference. So if you find they're not blending, it may be just the brand of your pencils, or maybe you're pressing too hard. So I'm going to show you how you should be layering your pencils while we're doing this. I use your colour chart for portraits as a guide, which is on YouTube. Oh yeah, it's a really good one, that one. Okay. I honestly do recommend, a few people have said the sound is funny. I don't know what's going on. I do need to invest in a new mic, to be fair, but they're over 100 quid. I personally, if budget allows, get some polychromos. You don't need the whole kit, just buy 12. Just buy 12. So I'm just going to shade in, let's do the top half, and then I can show you how to get the fuzz. So always go in with your base colour first, and your base colour is the colour that you will see through your fur. If that doesn't make sense, let me know. Cheap branded pencils are great, but if you're going into this and you're looking at selling your drawings or you're doing commission work, they're no good, in the sense of, if you're going to be using cheap supplies, you need to be charging cheap prices, because in the long run, and I do not diss cheap products at all, because I started out using WH Smith 6.99 pencils. That's how I learnt. And then each time I sold something, I then bought 2 or 3 pencils with that money, and I ended up sort of very slowly increasing my collection of pencils, but I did it in an extremely slow way, but it was worth it. But you need the archival quality if you're looking at doing commissions and selling your work for decent money. So you're going to put your base layer down, and the fur on the bumblebee is exactly the same as doing fur on an animal, to be perfectly honest. And I'm going to bring you down on TikTok so you can see a little bit closer. God, my stand's absolutely crap. I'm so tight-fisted at the minute that I won't pay the money I want for the stand I want. So I've got this thing that's shorter than normal. I found you have to use a lot more of the cheap pencils to get a simpler image to the better quality pencils. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Love the rainbow legs on your fuzzy. Thank you. That's going to be the opal version, those. Okay, so you've put your base colour down, whatever that might be. And when you work on top, we're going to work in a crisscross pattern. And as I said, this will work on any type of fur. Whether it be bumblebee fluff, cat fluff, dog fluff. The process is exactly the same. So what you're going to do is one of the errors, and I'm going to show you on the side here, one of the errors that people make when they start is they do fur in nice neat little soldiers like this, and then they do them in rows just like that, and that's how they end up doing their fur. But what you need to do is you need to keep your hands steady, and you need to get your fingers doing the work for you. So you're literally just pushing the pen forwards and backwards. 1, 2, 3. So I wouldn't put any more than 3 layers down, otherwise you're starting to eat into the tooth of your paper. So you're going to start from the top, and you're going to do little messy X's like this. And you need to get your fingers into a system of doing it quickly. And eventually it turns into muscle memory anyway, so you'll find it impossible not to do it any other way. So that's your first row of fur. I personally do not like Prismacolor, and I've just found out that Prismacolor are actually more than polychromos, so I would always go polychromos, to be honest. I don't find them very blendable. They're extremely soft and they crack. In fact, I have a pencil that's cracked through the entirety of the middle of it, so that's really frustrating. These live feeds on my YouTube will stay up permanently, so if you ever want to come back and go over any of this later on, the YouTube live feed will be up permanently. Thomas, think Benita did a tutorial on using 24 polychromos, 12 polychromos, and then I made over 120 colours, I think it is. So it is possible. So you've done your first row here, and you'll see the difference between this and what I've done here. Okay. And instead of going right underneath and having a nice neat line, what we're going to do is we're going to start halfway up. So we're going to start halfway up this section of fur that I've done here. Okay. And then we're going to repeat the process. The only difference with the fuzzy fur on the bee was that his fur was probably a little bit straighter, but I would still use a little crisscross motion. I would still overlap, because unless he's been through with some Brill cream and a comb, he's never going to have perfectly straight hair. Then we come down again. So we've put our light layer down. We're now doing our mid-tone. And you'll notice I will not have to go back and add any highlights because of all these gaps in between. So all these gaps in between give you that natural highlight without you having to go back. Push, flick or pull. Pull. And then we go again. And then I'm just going to come down to the bottom. YouTube's the same name, links in the bio if you want to get there quickly. So we're just going to go through. Like so. And this covers pretty much most fur types, to be honest. I mean, we're doing short hair here, really. There is a slightly different way of doing it for even shorter hair. And then for the bumblebee, for example, he had little bits of fur coming out the bottom of his bottom. So you just extend that fur with nice long sweeping motions. You notice how my hand is always staying still. I'm not moving my hand, I'm only moving my fingers. And then to create that shape, we need to ensure that we're going in the correct direction. So you'd always have to look at your reference photo for that. Okay. But you can see that we're closing off the shape, but we're keeping it very, very loose. Does that make sense so far? Yeah, cool. YouTube's making sense? I know there's a big delay between YouTube's. What, in pencils? Always start from the top, otherwise you'll end up working over your work. So always start at the top, really. Okay, so now we're going to take our colour again. Well, I can't even remember what colour I filled with now. This one, I think. With the same colour that you put your base colour down. Okay. So we're going back over with the light colour, and then we're going to blend. And we're going to do some light fluff down the bottom. We're going to blend over what we're doing, and we work in ovals. We don't go backwards and forwards, we work in ovals. So we're going to work over what we've done there. So we're going to go over about 2 or 3 times just to blend it all together. Okay. So pretty much as I did with B, I just then went in with a darker colour. I know obviously this is a different colour to what a B should be, but I'm just using whatever I've got in my hand. And then we're going to repeat that process with that additional colour. When you're working on fur, it's really best to work with multiple colours. If you work with a single colour, it's just going to look extremely flat. And then we're going to go again. So let's say, I don't know, this is part of the stripe, for example. I'm going to come down and maybe add that to the bottom as well. Like so. And then I'm going to go in with my middle colour. Yeah, it's really dark through my SLR because the lighting's absolutely crap. Let me try that bright light. There you go. Okay, so we're going to go in again with our middle colour, and then we're going to blend that in a bit, and we're going to apply slightly more pressure onto our pencil. But it's this movement that gives you the fluffy fur look. I'm going to pick up a slightly darker pencil, so whatever it's basically you're starting to look at the colours in your shadows now. So let's say, for example, let's go say he's darker up the top here, just to be able to show you, for example. because we want to round him off. So I don't want the dark everywhere. So I'm just going to put some dark streaks in. Put a few around his bottom. Like so. The longer the strands of fur, the longer you give the illusion of the fur. So if you want to do something really short, so a short haired animal, you would keep your fur extremely short like this. But I'm going a little bit longer. And then if you're doing extremely long doggy's hair, you know, then you'll be doing them even longer. So bear that in mind. So if you're doing something like a Jack Russell, which has this really, really short fur, if you end up doing fur this length, that Jack Russell isn't going to look right because it's furrier than what we know a Jack Russell to look like. So you really, this is why using references is so important. If you don't use references, we start putting in what we have in our head as the animal, and that's where it starts to go wrong, because we're not 100% sure on fur direction and things like that. So I won't bore you today, but if anybody's interested, go and Google semiotics, because it's actually really, really interesting. So what our brain thinks and what we put down and things like that. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go back over with the lightest colour that we put down. So the first initial colour that we put down. And I'm going to just blend again that second layer that we had. But I'm going to use the same strokes as I've been using for all the other colours. And you'll see that it's starting to blend all that fur together. Like so. So you can see that it's all starting to blend out now, and you'll literally work between your colours. So we'll go back in with the medium tone, and then we'll keep going. If you'll find like a shadow area, so say for example this part is really dark, we're going to start glazing over that. And when I mean glazing, instead of going in fur direction shapes, don't know how you'd call it, but whatever. Hi Chloe. What you want to do is glaze over the whole thing. So what you're doing is you're applying the colour to everything. You're not just putting fur strokes down. So we're glazing over the whole lot with the colour. So you still have a little bit of detail underneath, but we're now making that section darker. And then again, if there's any strong shadows in certain parts of the fur, don't be afraid to go in and add those. Like so. I'm going to blend over again with the lightest colour that I used, which was the base colour. Is that helpful at all? Did that help? See, we've done a very quick basics on this. Just to sort of give you the idea of what you need to do to get started. So that was the fur request, so we can take that off the list. Okay, so a human ear. First things first, go and find a reference. So I'm going to very quickly go to Pexels, and I'm going to go and find a reference of a human ear. You can do it without references, but again, you want it to be as precise as possible. So the basics, really, of a human ear, it's like a Y. I have done these before on tutorials, but let me get my graphite. I am going to miss any comments on YouTube, so I will have to catch up with them in a moment, okay? Okay, so the basics of an ear, if you're not doing any trace down method, or you want to do, I'll put a nose on the list. I think I've got I've got a dog's nose on the list. If you want to freehand it rather than trace down or grid it, the best thing to do is just initially give it really, really easy lines. So we're going to fill this box with an ear shape. So if you just start with the basic box shapes, just keep your lines really, 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 really simple. I don't even know what you'd call that shape. And then you can just curve them off to get the shape that's similar to the reference that you're using. Unless you've been drawing ears for the last 10 years, and I even think people that have been doing it for longer will still use a reference. So please don't be afraid to use references at all. I've literally, for tonight, for the sake of tonight, I'm just grabbing whatever's on. I don't recommend it, obviously, but just grabbing whatever's on Pixabay. So you're just going to refine that shape, and inside there's normally what we call a Y shape that sits roughly here, and then it goes round. So you can see why we call it a Y shape, because it looks like a Y. So that's sort of the inner part of the ear that you want to be looking at doing. You then have like a D, like a letter of a D, I suppose, or a B if it's that way around actually. And that's the, I don't actually know what it's called. If you know what it's called, I want to say tragus. It is a tragus, isn't it? Because I've got that pierced. Yeah, tragus piercing, I think. So what you then do is you draw a line that sits roughly in the middle, comes all the way up around that Y, and then it comes down, and then it tapers off as you come down the ear. So sort of roughly a shape like that. So what you then want to do is just refine shapes within the ear. So I'm just looking at my reference, refining those shapes. Might need to bring that down slightly. You've got the very inner ear here, the whole of the ear basically, and then you can start sort of shading in from there. So this bit joins onto the head, this bit, and this bit down here has a little join that goes onto the head. So when you do your shading, when you shade inside your Y, that bit dips in. This bit under here has a shadow. This bit under here has a shadow. Again, you would be looking at your reference to determine exactly where your light and shade falls. But it's enough to give you a bit of a rough idea on how to do it. But ideally, you really, really need to be using references. Not only that, because ears are different on everybody. They're not exactly the same. There are some questions to answer, but just mention if you're from YouTube live feed as well, and we'll add you. Oh, cool. Bro, thank you, darling. Hi, Tough Cookie. Okay, so dog's nose. I'm going to attempt to do this without a reference. So, yeah. first thing to do is, I'm going to do it in coloured pencil actually, because you're going to get less shine. So the first thing ideally you need to do is create like a rounded triangle, like that. That's the only way I can describe it, like a rounded triangle. So that's the first thing to start off with. What you can then do is divide it into 3 sections, like so. I'm trying to think off the top of my head now. Okay, I'm really testing myself. They have a little incurve bit here, and then they come up and around, and then it meets. So it's that sort of shape that they have. Again, each dog's nose will be different, but you should be looking at your reference, but this gives you a rough idea of the initial shape. They always have, it might not necessarily go all the way up, again reference, but they always have a little line that just sits up in the middle. And that middle line, if you're looking on TikTok, tends to go in slightly. So that line is always darkest. And this line always meets where the bottom of the lip set sits. In there. Okay. Sometimes these go all the way around and they're squarer. Sometimes they're rounder. Again, you need to look at your references. Like so. And then you'll find that with doggy noses, depending on where the light is hitting, I have drawn horses, yeah, not many, but I have drawn horses. Depending on where the light is hitting, I'm going to curve that off slightly. Most of the front of the nose, all this section here, will be darker than the top of the nose. And a good way of adding texture is, if I'm going to sharpen my pencil, there's a few ways you can do texture on a nose. Let me show you one way. So let's grab my indenting tool. Okay, I've got my indenting tool. Probably use a smaller one, but there's something I wanted to show you as well. Now I don't know where I've put it. Did I put it in here? I did. I just want to show you guys really quickly before I forget, especially those on YouTube, because you haven't seen this in... This is a print, by the way, but look at the wing option. This wing option is available in my shop now, but how flipping gorgeous does it look? I just wanted to show you before I forgot. But yeah, I've made the wings holographic. I love it. Anyway, back to the doggy. So, my seasoned Patreons and YouTubers will be aware of this. So you can either get, this is just a cut off bit of lino, or you can get a piece of paper folded up maybe 4 or 5 times, or you can get a thickish piece of card, whatever it needs to be, quite squishy. Okay, so I'm going to show you in the section above it actually. So this is a way that you can put, you know, like the little white dots they have on their nose. So you can get your little ball tool and you can just make little indents in your paper. That was a bit too deep. That was really too deep. I'm getting quite aggressive here with my paper. It does look amazing, doesn't it? So when you then come to colour over, you get these little white highlights left on your paper. I've been a bit aggressive with mine and they've gone in really, really deep. But you can see why. So I'm just going to go through again So you can see how many times I can go over it, and it works really, really well. So that's one option. Okay. Yeah, there is. I'm just really tired. I don't know how great. And my hands are freezing. I cannot get warm today. It doesn't matter what I do. My hands are freezing. So the other option is what we call, and it is actually a technical term, it's a type of shading called squiggling. And what you can do is, hopefully you can see really clearly in both, you squiggle your pen about and you just make these sort of messy, squiggly lines on the nose, like so. And you do that all the way round. Make a mess with your pencil, and what you're doing is you're leaving gaps in between your pencil lines. So then when it comes to it, you can go, right, okay, there's no highlights down here, it's just shadow, but there's a little one there. I'm going to keep that bit open. I'm going to maybe make that one a little bit smaller. Say, for example, on the front of the nose, I'm going to shade the entirety of the bottom because most of that would be in shadow depending on where your light is sitting. And again, please remember I am sort of rushing this, and I'm really sorry, the lighting keeps changing on my phone. So you can just, as I say, pick out little highlights that you want to keep in there. Nobody's going to ask you to do exact to the reference unless they have a scar or they have a specific type of nose. You can get away with this type of technique. So I'm just going to do it, say for example, on this top half, I think, for the sake of time. And maybe keep a little couple on this side, just like so. Let's very quickly fill the inside of that nose quickly. Pushing a lot harder on my pencil than I recommend, but I'm just trying to get through the tutorial for you guys so I can get as many in as I can. And you've got horrible light reflection happening, so we're going to go in with the black to make it darker. That just sorts that bit out. So this little nose indent, most of the time it stops in between the nostrils. So it stops in between there, and it's always much darker underneath here. So you can just build up your shadow in that area. You'll be going much slower and you'll be doing much more layers than I'm doing. Please remember that. But what most have is a little highlight that sits just about here. So I'm going to go up and add that highlight in so you can see exactly where I mean. And we're going to do the same. In fact, I'm going to leave it as light as it is on there already. And normally, because this is coming out from underneath, they're quite curved, you want to have it a little bit darker underneath and then just lighten it as you come up through the front. What I will show you is generally how fur comes out from the nose. I don't know if that is something you struggle with, but there is quite a defined and regular pattern that nearly all animals I've drawn, it's the same. And normally they've got like a little dark line across the top as it meets the fur on the top of their muzzle as well. But again, this will all be down to your references that you're using. I'm just going to keep shading in between. I wouldn't leave this very solid white because I personally don't like it. What I would do is grab my white luminance and then I would just soften them out a little bit, just so they're blended out a bit more. It just softens it all, blends it all together, and gives it a little bit more of a natural look. If you have a slice tool, you can get some highlights out using that. Where did I put mine? It's there. You can eventually go in if you want and just pull out some highlights with the knife if you want. Or if you have a Tombow Mono eraser, which is another technique of doing it. This is really annoying. My light keeps changing. I'm so sorry. Looks horrendous. Again, you can just go in and just, I don't know, let's say he's much more highlighted over here. You can just bring that out a bit more, like so. Hopefully that helps. Obviously, as I say, I am rushing these. But I want to show you from the nose, you follow the direction of the nose and the fur comes out pretty much directly from the edge of the nose, like that. Even when you come up and around, you'll see, again, you should be looking at your references, but you'll always get the darker ones, and then let's say this is a lighter dog, it will then come into the lighter fur. So you can then draw the lighter fur. This would be much longer than what I've drawn it in, but it gives you the basis. And then you can extend or define or make them darker or solid. You don't have to have fur detail everywhere. Don't be afraid to have solid patches of shadow. And then on the top of the nose, there is normally like a darker shadow area here before it goes into the fur. So this is like the tiniest of the hair. Only just sort of starting to come out. So I'm using the tiniest little, this is the size I'm doing, and I'm being a bit sporadic about where I'm going with it all. And that sort of gives you the starting of going into the muzzle of your doggo. Does that help? Hopefully that helps. Okay, dog's nose done, colour picking done, layering fur done. Human nose. Again, ideally you should be using a reference. If you've got any that you want from my YouTube guys, please pop in the comments what you'd like to see. Okay, so the easiest way that I do it without using a reference is I will work in circles. I will just do, that's the bulbous part of the nose, this is the nostril part of the nose, and depending on the angle I want to do it, depends on where I will put the other nostril of the nose. So I will just work in circles. like so. I will then work from the top of the bulb of the nose, depending on the angle that the face is at. Eyebrow. Okie dokie. Skin texture. I do have quite an extensive set of tutorials on skin texture, but I could show you maybe something like freckles. Would that help? Or is it more how to get it blended? So again, noses, and then we would get that slope. But again, you should really be looking at references. I am double streaming, so I'm finding it really hard at the moment to get it right on my phone and on YouTube. Is it bad I only ever use half a reference for my sketches and then just close out of it? What do you mean close out of it? I've got lips on the list. So we know that when our nose goes onto the lips, we have that little bit that comes out. So we've got to make sure that we get that in as well. So this is much more of sort of like a side profile of a nose. And then all we do is refine those shapes. In fact, you'd probably barely see the other side. I don't even think you would see the other side at the angle that I've done that nose. So then you would go out and then you would erase all the bits that you don't need. And at this stage, if you aren't using a reference, you can do any style of nose that you want. It can be big, it can be round, it can be tiny. It can be anything you want, but you're going to want a small amount of that nostril showing. So just draw a little shape just there. It depends. If you're wanting to do something more free flowing, so let me give you an example. In here. Okay, so if you're wanting to do something, it's not in here, it's really annoying. It's in my other one. So if you want to do something a bit more free-flowing and not as realistic, then yeah, go for it. I think, quite honestly, if one of the things you're struggling with is realism, then I would always use a reference. And I wouldn't stop looking at that reference. I mean, I've been doing realism for over 5 years now. I don't consider myself an expert. I am self-taught. I do not consider myself an expert. There's loads of stuff I need to learn. But the one thing I would always do is use a reference, because although my knowledge has gained with regards to light, perspective, shape, size, all of that, if I took that and drew the same person, it would look like her or him time and time again, because I would be using my same knowledge and just recycling it. Whereas if I'm using a reference, I'm looking at all the differences on that reference to make that person look like a different person, rather than all my people looking the same. Hopefully that makes sense. So, you know, this sort of thing, I would just use a reference to get the pose, and then the rest I would just make up. But if I want to do something really realistic, or as realistic as I can possibly get it, I would use a reference the entire way through. I wouldn't even consider trying to make it up. I do have a little bit of knowledge, so there are things like the hair and stuff where I just can't be bothered to sit there and do it exact. Then I would just do that. I'm just answering questions on YouTube at the moment, so I am dual living. And again, you know, I would use very specific references anyway, but if you don't mind having a bit of freedom over it, it's not a problem. It really just depends on what the final thing is you want it to look like. The hair on the graphite lady can be free flow, make it up. Yeah, I think it's just down to you, really. Down to how you want it to be. Okay, so we've done a nose. I would also say that if you wanted to do a nose from the front side, again, just work on circles. Straight away, you know, you've got an instant nose shape. All you've got to do is refine it. That's all you've got to do. So you get your little nostril details in, and you would just refine the shape. But it gives you the very, very basics to get going. Going on that, as lips have been requested, again, work on circles. So if you were doing side lips, for example, not circles I know, but ovals, how would you do long strands of hair unlike animal fur? Okay, we'll cover that next. Do you mean like straggly bits of hair, bits that fly away and not quite on this person, but sort of loose bits like this? Is that the sort of thing you mean? Okay, so side lips, I'm trying to think now without a reference. You always get sort of that slope, and then you get like an underslope. It's the only way I can describe it. And then generally your lips slide down. So again, you'll be looking at references for all of this, but just using these initial shapes to get you started. Again, if you're doing a front view pair of lips, again, circle, 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 and then you can do your middle line, work up to the top, down to the other side, and work around to that side. And then again, you just get rid of what you don't need. And it's just a very quick way of giving yourself very basic shape for lips. Hopefully that makes sense. Got some very fish lips happening here. Don't quite know what's going on there, but you get the gist. You get the gist. Animal fur is lots of short, but in the middle of human hair it looks very different. Okay, so with regards to like human hair, I've quite often said don't be ever afraid to have solid areas of colour. Quite often everybody feels that they need to draw every single strand of hair, but actually you don't need to. I'm going to show you in graphite probably the quickest way. So like for example with her, she's got lots of strands of hair as you can see, but we've also got lots of area of solid colour as well. So I've got 2B in hand. I'm just going to shade over the whole box. I'm not going to be neat. Like so. Again, you would take a lot more care than me. I would then very gently just blend this out just to get it a bit smoother. And then all you would do is look at where your highlights and your shadows are. So the first thing I would do is pull out any highlights. So let's say, for example, we're looking at someone with very straight hair. So we'd pull out some highlights. do a couple across just to make it look a bit messy and a bit more natural, like so. I might need to zoom you in a bit on the YouTube. Where's my brush? There's my brush. And then I can come back in with my 2B and I'll go, right, okay, so there's a really deep shadow in here. So I would work on getting that darker, like so. And then as I come nearer to the highlighted area, I would then maybe start adding some strands of hair. But I would use the same technique. I would cross over the hair. But I would just do it in a much longer motion. I'm only doing this with a 2B at the moment. I'll come in with a 4B. 4B, where are you? It's in a pencil extender somewhere. It's staring at me. I know it is. There it is. Needs sharpening. Won't fit in my sharpener because it's too short. Okay. So I'll come in with my 4B now, and then I can add some darker strands. Go over what I've added. And then say there's a big shadow area here, I'm just going to shade that in. Again, cross over some areas, and I'm going to actually have this be in shadow as well. What I personally would do is blend over the entire thing. See, I'm being really nice and neat. Let's tidy that up quickly. And then you would literally just keep building up. So again, if there's a really deep shadow in there, you just keep building that up. But if you don't have these solid areas of colour or shading or whatever you want to call it, it tends to look over polished, if that makes any sense. So let's say it goes down a little bit. There's like a curve in the hair. Let's say it's on top of the head, for example. We would shade the bottom because the light wouldn't be catching it as much. And we would shade the top a little bit as well. What type of dog's ear? There's loads of them. And then I would come in with my eraser. And then again, I would just pull out a few highlights that may be in that area. Does that help? I think one of the biggest fear people have is not getting enough detail in. but in all honesty, a lot of realism isn't necessarily about what you can see, but sometimes about what you can't. Yeah, I think they're watching YouTubes upstairs at the moment. What type of dog's ear? Long, curly, short, floppy, straight? It's a Tombow Mono. So there's 2 Tombow Monos. I'm from Kent in England. So this is the 2.3 round. I'm just answering someone on TikTok. Camera's not focusing for some reason on there. It's a Tombow Mono, and this is the rectangle one, which is 2.5 by 5. Can you do a short hair down dog ear? So short haired. Oh God. Dalmatians, they have ears like that, don't they? Dalmatian ear. Funny enough, I did do one of the first tutorials we did for my patrons was a Dalmatian ear. Okay. Oh, you want a Jack Russell? Okay. My Jack Russell's ears weren't down, they were up. But then he was cross corgi, so. Okay. All the Jack Russells I can find have up ears. So as they're pretty much the same, I'm just going to do the whatever it was I said, Dalmatian ears. So it's basically the same. Yeah, okay, so a Labrador, a Visuela, whatever they're called. I can't remember what they're called. I need to move this because I need to keep seeing any questions pop up on my YouTube. Bear with me. Just adjusting where my references are compared to my YouTube. There we go. How's everyone doing on YouTube? Is this helping? Now I've lost my reference again. Come on, where are you? That's helpful. No. Oh, it's all going wrong. Hang on. Get over there, mister. Thank you. Okay, we've got a thumbs up, we've got a yeah, we've got a yeah, and we've got a thank you very much. Okay, so as I say, Jack Russells, Labradors, their ear shapes are practically the same when it comes to drawing them. Again, use your references. I can't just stress that enough. Use references. I really shouldn't have started this end. So I'm going to start down here. So any dog's ear is essentially a rounded triangle again. So they normally sort of sit roughly like so. That's sort of roughly the shape that you have. When it meets the head, there's generally a little curl in as it meets the head, but again, it will depend on your reference. And then at the top, there's normally the curl and then it flattens out here. Okay? So that's the basics of the shape. So the ear shapes are pretty simple to draw. So if you were to do an upright ear, again, your ear shapes are pretty simple. What they tend to do is when they hit the side of the dog's head, or even cat's head, they tend to curve more on the top, come around, curve, and then they meet the head. Hopefully that makes sense. let's get rid of that. Okay, so I think for the sake of my sanity, I'm going to shade all of this in with a 4B. Hi Georgina. Can you still see okay on YouTube? Yeah. Cool. I'm going to shade over the whole lot. If you were doing a Dalmatian ear, you would leave any of the area white, or I could go in with my kneaded eraser and I could pull out any white areas. I'm going to show you that now. Hi Ava. And then I'm just gonna blend that over what we've done. Like so. I'm going to do a little bit of what would be the head, just on this side. Like so. So say for example on the picture that I'm looking at, all this is fairly light, so I'm just going to pull out some of that graphite. You can leave the space white if you want to. I'm just doing this for the sake of time. So that sort of gives you where the white sections are on that ear. I'm just going to make it a little bit brighter with my Tombow. So, it's a kneaded eraser, Faber-Castell kneaded eraser. So normally when you're at the top of the ear, you'll have, when it comes from the top of the head, you'll have your fur coming up, and then it follows the direction of the ear. So it changes direction with the ear. So eventually it falls across the top of the ear. So you'll just copy the shape, as I say, that you have on the top there. Just going to tidy up the mess. And what we've got is, you can see obvious parts of fur hitting into that white section, and then we've got quite a solid area of black that comes all the way down. Like so. So we're creating the shape with the shadows. We're not worrying about where highlights are. We're concentrating on the shadow areas. And where there's this little bump, there's some tiny little fine hairs that come out. This is where, for me, I would actually use my 2H. I like using my 2H for these tiny little fine hairs. Then as we come down out of this solid area into some more fur, we can then just gently, with our crisscross motion, create the illusion of fur into that highlighted area. We've got quite a dark shadow area in here, so I'm going to add that. And then we've got one on the end which is quite dark. We've got a little patch down the bottom here, which is quite nice and dark, and then he's got a cute little white patch just down here, so I'm going to take that out. And then he's got a little white bit there, so I'm going to take that out with the eraser. Okay, I'm going to swap to the 2B now. And then we're just going to add from the white into the dark section some fur strokes. But again, because it's a short haired doggy, we need to keep our pencil strokes fairly short. So mine are no more than about 1 centimetre, but I am drawing it pretty tiny on here. you just keep it nice and short and follow the direction of the ear. That is really, really important. So I'm coming across the ear, but I'm then turning it down. So I'm going in this motion when I'm doing the fur. If I was to go in this motion, my fur would look like it just goes dead across, which it doesn't. It curves down. So you need to use this curving motion. And that way it helps your eye be led down the ear, and it gives it much more of a natural turn. And then normally on the end of the ear you'll have a bit of fluff, so just draw your fluff on the end. And again, just following the direction, so we're going out towards the edge. You'll notice I haven't done anything on the white yet. I'm only working on where the black areas are. And then I've got black area down here. So again, following the direction of the fur. What I would do at this stage to do anything in the white section, in fact, let's do the dark section first. So under here, again, looking at your reference, but under here, mine has a very dark section, which normally happens. And then the very edge of the ear. And you need the edge of the ear generally to be darker because it gives the rounded feel to the edge. But again, your reference will determine all of this. So we just keep working on the shadow areas. Ignore any of the white. Ignore it completely. So we've got little tufts. I'm going to swap to my B actually, because it's quite dark. So I'm going to swap to my B, and then I'm going to go in with the little tufts that just come out on the edge of the ear, like so. Some will be smooth, some will be fluffy. Again, look at your ear reference. So when it comes to doing the white section, I'm going to use my 2H, and I'm very gently going to just add a little bit of detail in where I see it on my reference. I'm not going to add tons. And then I can bring it down a little bit from the top. And just make sure you're blending your edges out by using these different gradients of your pencils. Don't just stick to one or two gradients. So let's just keep building that up. Can you see how quickly it builds up though? It really doesn't take that long. I'm going to go back to the 4B. I can work out where it needs to be a little bit darker in patches. Pretty dark on the edge there. And a little bit bigger. Grab my 2H, and there's just a tiny little bit of fluffy edge that comes up through here. But that is the basis on doing a dog's ear. Fur direction is very important. Then you can go in and add any highlights if you want to. Like so. Does that help? Again, I'm just going through absolute basics here. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Joe. Send you my love and big hugs. because you had to draw a dog ear and then a left. I'm confused. Okay, a feather and a seashell. Oh God. Do you mean a singular feather or a feather like on an eagle or an owl or something like that? Because I need... It depends. It really depends on the type. Curly Bichon hair. Yep. Oh my God, what is that? Oh dear, that's just a ball of fluff. Okay, so I need to try and find a decent reference. Okay, I would pretty much tackle this the same as I would the hair that we did up here. So I'm going to work in this section. Now, Bichon hair is generally white, I think, aren't they? You and your peacock. I think they're generally white. So what I would do personally, I think for me, is I would probably... If it was me tackling this, the trace down would help. I think you would have to trace down a dog like this to get absolute detail. But I'm just going to do a very quick layer of B in graphite. Just do it very quickly. If you're doing this in coloured pencil and graphite ordinarily, I would suggest doing the trace down anyway, or a light box. So I'm doing a B because I don't want tons of graphite down, basically, because they're very light in colour. So I'm going to blend all that through. Stupid camera lighting. Must be driving you lot nuts over on TikTok. Just going to clean the edges up just so I don't look quite so messy. This is where things like a Tombow Mono will really, really help. And indenting as well if you need to, but I would ideally go for a Tombow Mono. Okay. So, can we still see okay in yeah, in YouTube we're fine. I think we'll zoom you in a little bit if I can. So, we've got like literally going in quite a lot of different directions. So, instead of doing the ear, I'm going to do the fur on the chest, and it's really curly. So, I would literally sit and just add the curls with the eraser. I wouldn't even bother trying to add them with the pencil. I would be going in with the eraser, I think, to begin with, and then we've got some long curly or wavy bits on this one, not just curly. Under his neck it comes sort of out quite fluffy, and we've got some wavy bits again, like perm. It's just sort of very much multi-directional by the looks of this doggy. Again, I'm not following the reference like for like. I am using it as a guide though to the shapes of curls and the direction and things like that. So, you know, you don't have to be spot on to the reference, but it gives you a good base. For graphite, I use Faber-Castell 9000s. They're my favourite. For colouring pencils, I use Faber-Castell Polychromos, or I will use Pablo's or Bit Luminant. So you can see that's already got a base down. Then I would work with my 2B, and I would just start to accentuate some of these curls. Get some shadows in. To get the shadows in the little areas in between. Draw those in. P.S. If you're on my TikTok and you haven't seen my most recent TikTok, I would love it if you could go in there. Even if you didn't share, if you could just like it and copy the link. I would absolutely love it if you could, because I'm so happy with it, and TikTok's gone, no, we're not going to show anyone today. So again, you can fill in these little spaces where the shadows would be, and it just slowly builds it up. Again, don't worry about working on the white yet. Get those shadows in first. Just had an idea what I'd love to draw once I'm up and running again, with mention of peacock. Damn you, peacocks. Look, a peacock is on the list, but it won't be for a while yet. So can you see how curly and wavy that's already looking? And we haven't really had to do a lot of work. Haven't had to do a lot of work at all, really. So you would build up on this, but that gives you the basics on how I would tackle it. So I would grab one of my smaller blending tools and I would blend all those in. Then once I'm happy with all my shadow parts, for example, I would then start blending some shadow into the curls. So say for example this curl here, it would disappear and be much darker down the bottom here. And then it would get lighter as we go up to the top. And then we would be quite dark underneath here. So we start making those curls much more 3D. And we'll go in and we can intensify the shadows. Refine each curl. Like so, and you would just work on each one. So if you've got like one curling over the other, you're going to generally have a little bit of shadow underneath. The technique's exactly the same with coloured pencil. You would just be doing this with the preferred colours that you need. How's that? Does that help? This is exactly the same way as I would tackle curly hair on a human too. Okay, I missed the bit about feather. Somebody did say feather. I did see it, my lovely, but I didn't see whether you meant like on a bird, a singular feather. let's just do a singular feather, and let's just grab a couple of blues just to get it going, just to have a bit of colour for a change. So I don't know, let's say the feather, I'm just gonna do a section of the feather. My cat's been acting like that, it's really annoying. I do think the cold has a huge amount to do with it. So again, with feathers, I would put my base layer down. You would be neater than I am being. Babe? Chocky, coffee chocky, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, you in a raid or something?
Yeah.
Oh, surprise. No wonder I haven't had a coffee.
No, sometime.
I would, again, depending on your reference, it really does depend on your reference, but I would use my lighter pencil with a bit more pressure just to map out where certain things live. So like the centre part, the quill, don't know if that's what it calls. If you were doing realism digitally, what brush would you use? I think I would vary it, quite honestly. There are some hairbrushes that you can get for free, so it is worth downloading those. But if I was doing some strandy type hair, I would probably use something with a bit of texture, or even like the studio pen, the one that tapers off quite nicely at the end. So again, you would look at where, I don't even know what the bits of feathers are called, so I'm not even going to try and pretend I understand. But just follow again the direction that's in your reference, and I would, again with the light colour, map in where that all sits. And again, depending on your reference, they can actually be pretty solid colour, to be honest. But most will have a dark section and a light section, so you'll sort of see roughly like that. Then I would cover over let's say, for example, the light shining down this end, you're going to see the detail in the feather a lot more. Horse eye, dog eye. What do you mean by cartilage? Well, that's the bit in the middle. You're getting all techie on me. I do have a bell for my coffee, but the bell is used on TikTok to call out trolls and haters, and it's hilarious, so I haven't used it because I didn't want anybody thinking. So up here again, this is going to be my shadow area, so I'm just going to make this darker. Again, I'm being solid. Again, don't be afraid to have solid areas. And then I can just bring that down into the lighter area, or where the light is hitting the most. Let's say, for example, most of this side is actually in shadow, shall we? Let's do that. So I'm just going to go in with my darker colour. Let's bring that shadow further down. Let's stop it here. fact, should we go all out? Let's go all out, shall we, on this particular feather? Just to have a look at something a little bit different. Let's have it going into green. So I'm just going to blend it into green. So I'm going to blend over in solid colour into the blue. I'm going to blend that blue out a little bit more by using individual pencil strokes rather than glazing it over. Bye, Erica. No, I haven't shared this live out actually. Most of the time, the edges of feathers are actually very smooth. Where they're preened, they tend to be very smooth. Okay, I'm just going to do solid. Bones is nothing I've actually drawn before, so that's something I would have to probably come back and do, because it's not something I've ever tackled. If we're going to match it in, we'll do green down this side as well. I'm just going to glaze over the whole thing. And we'll come in with a much darker green. Nearly done on the feather. And then if you want some really nice striking highlights, then of course you can go in with your slice tool. I probably haven't got enough wax down, but you can then go in and get some really fine highlights in there if you wanted to, like so. What colour is the centre rachis showing off now? It's a very, very light colour of what we were using. But again, it gives you a rough idea. We are working pretty quickly tonight, to be fair. I do sell my artwork, yeah. Best thing to do really is contact me either via my website or Instagram. Links in my bio, but I do have original work up in my Etsy store as well. So there's various different ways that you can contact. Okay, so lips, hair. So a horse's eye was next, wasn't it? I'm going to have to definitely grab, but depending on the light of a horse's eye, they have quite an unusual pupil. I don't know if you're quite familiar with those. If you're a horse lover, you will be. So I think I'll probably just go over the basics of the shape rather than all the shading, because the shading is just so similar on everything. Just trying to find a decent... Again, every animal is so similar in the shape of their eye. Generally what gives it away that it's a horse, again, is the shape of the pupil. If you do know what a horse's pupil looks like, don't answer. But if you don't, what shape do you think it is? No, doggy, that is not the shape. No, doggy. No, doggy. Next door's dog's determined to answer. Okay, so basic shape, I'm just going to very quickly copy one off Google. Don't recommend this if you are doing this for selling. But most eye shapes are oval, pointed ovals. Like so. I don't know what is up with Dee Dee today, but she's been so noisy. And then we go across with the eyelid like that. So when we do eyes, we always get the rounded areas in, so we just do the basic shapes. But generally a horse's pupil is not round. Same with goats. A horse's pupil looks like this. Very good tonight. It helps go back to basics. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Pam. Yeah, it doesn't hurt to remind yourself of things at all, actually, so it's not a bad thing. So the way to get any eye looking shiny is depth. And I will bang on about this every time I teach somebody. If you don't go dark enough, it won't look 3D. It does look like a mad duck, doesn't it? So when you're coming to do an eye and you want it to look nice and shiny and glossy, making sure you get your darks in. So if I'm doing an eye, that's probably one of the first things I will do. So this goes for human eyes as well. So I would go in and I would mark where the darkest areas are and leave any highlights as white space. Okay. Oh. Most animals have a layer of flesh before it meets the fur. So they generally have like a layer of flesh underneath here that meets the fur. And then the fur generally sort of comes out from this section. It doesn't come out from right underneath the eye. I would then look at getting any of the dark areas in on a horse's eye. And I would look at your reference, and like this one's got a highlight that sits here, so I'd leave that as white space. And there's a highlight here that I would leave as white space. So I would draw around that white space. How long have we got? We've got 15 minutes. See if we can get this done. So we're blocking all that in. We're going to block up around the eye. Get that filled in. Leave some space again for highlights. So his eyes actually really like chestnutty brown. So down here on my reference, I've got like a dark section that comes down here. So that's clearly a reflection. There's a light section next to it. So we're going to leave that as white. Where's me? There. So I'm going to get that in now so I don't lose that. And then all in here is pretty dark. So I'm very likely going to shade that in. And then we've got quite a bright reflection up here on the top of his eye in that shape. So we're just going to draw that shape in and leave that completely white. And then we can fill in any of the other area. But any highlights you see, leave white. So don't try and be adding whites afterwards by using an eraser or adding white pen. Try and do as much of your highlights in the beginning processes as you can. That way you're not trying to go back on yourself all the time. You do get the lines coming out just like human eyes from the middle, so you can add those in. And again with human eyes, the where the iris meets the pupil, it's pretty soft. So even if you're doing human eyes, you would soften the iris and pupil blend where it meets in there. You would just soften that out. I'm going to bring some darker lines out as well. I probably won't have time to do a dog's eye now because the live feed finishes at 10. But the process is exactly the same. It's just that the shape of the eye will depend on the reference that you're using. So again, I've left all the highlight area completely white. And then we can just keep on blending up colour. So I'm going in with my mid-tone. I can come back in with my darker tone just to blend that in. So I can see a little bit of sky in the horse's eye, so I would just grab a blue and I would fill that whole space with blue. I wouldn't even worry about blending over the edge of that horse's eye. None of that would bother me. And then I can go in and just make shapes. It doesn't matter what the shapes are, to be honest, unless you're drawing specifically again from a reference. So let's say we're going to draw a tree line. I don't know, we'll just draw some fake trees going on in there. Thank you. So I've got my chocolate bar in it. Nice, 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 nice. Okay, that highlight actually on my particular reference needs to come round a bit more, so I'm just going to bring that round. So I'm going to make this bit a little bit darker, a bit bigger. But can you see how much easier it is if you just leave your highlights as white paper? Don't try and get them in afterwards. work them in as you're going through the portrait. Just makes life so much easier. If yours has got mega long eyelashes, or depending on where your eyelashes sit, I would probably indent before you do them. In this case, I think I could probably use the slice tool to get them in. Going to keep blending. You would work up your layers a lot softer than I am. I'm working pretty quickly tonight just to be able to make it helpful for you. So we certainly haven't got precision going on here, but it's giving you the basics that you need just to get yourself started, really. You can go in, so where's my white pencil? I was going to call it a pen then. I am losing everything I put down. There it is. I just wish that my imprecise looked so good. Oh, bless you. So I'm going to extend this highlight up a little bit more, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to use my white pencil, and it's going to soften it all together as well. Just don't overdo the white pencil because it can end up smudging. That's even tinier on my reference, but I might blend over very softly just to darken it slightly. Again, and then you can just go up and down, add some deets in. Let me see if I can get any, if I've got enough wax down to get eyelashes in. So eyelashes are pretty all over the place on this horse, and they're actually brown, so I could get away with it a little bit. Go over with your pencil. Going with a dark brown too, because it would be darker where it meets the eyelid. I'm just going to blend over that bit just to blend it all in a bit. And that's a extremely quick of how I would do a horse eye. Hopefully that helps. Yeah, fingers crossed that made sense to you guys, but there you go. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 mini tutorials in 2 hours. There you go. How was that? Made a right mess all over my desk as usual. I tidy up and then I make a mess. Then I tidy up and then I make a mess. And don't forget, if you are interested, that the bee prints with the holographic wings are now in the shop, looking beautiful. I, by the way, am having trouble sourcing the reference picture for the next Sapphire series drawing, so it may change from what I originally had planned, or I may have to make it up from about 10 different references. So I'm going to have a play tonight on Procreate to see if I can get some images done. If I can find something, then I will be live tomorrow on TikTok. Yeah, I don't know. We'll just have to see. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody on my YouTube. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Hopefully that's helped. I know it's been short and sweet, but it's, like you say, it's gone back to basics and remembering things that sometimes I think we forget or we take for granted when we start doing these. But have a good morning, afternoon, evening, whichever it may be when you are watching, and I shall see you on the next live, guys. Bye to everyone on YouTube. Bye.